The Trump-Epstein scandal just got crazier as Hillary Clinton, Bill Barr, and Merrick Garland were just hit with subpoenas. Trump's efforts to help Jair Bolsonaro have backfired. This Mike Flood town hall beatdown that got caught on camera has exposed a very scary situation for Republicans. And the Texas gerrymandering battle just hit a new key level. We're talking about all that and even more on today's brand new Philip DeFranco show. You daily dive into the news, and I'm giving you a double dose today after you watch this show. Click the top link in my description or pinned comment and go listen to today's brand new episode of the In Good Faith podcast with Philip DeFranco. I've got a special guest for you today. It's available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, anywhere you listen to podcasts. And make sure you also follow the podcast there. Give us 5 stars. But that said, we have a lot to talk about in the here and now, starting with this. The House Oversight Committee just issued subpoenas to Bill and Hillary Clinton, as well as several other former government officials in relation to the Epstein probe. With this morning, Representative James Comer, who's the chairman of the committee, announcing that he is seeking depositions from several people between August and October, including both of the Clintons, former AGs Loretta Lynch, Eric Holder, Bill Barr, Merrick Garland, Jeff Sessions, and Alberto Gonzalez, and then former FBI directors James Comey and Robert Mueller. Notably, you have Trump's name not on that list. But the subpoena does also direct the Department of Justice to release the full and complete Epstein files to the committee by August 19th. We also had Comer publishing the letters issued to each person, and in the one to Bill Clinton, he wrote, "By your own admission, you flew on Jeffrey Epstein's private plane 4 separate times in 2002 and 2003. During one of those trips, you were even pictured receiving a massage from one of Mr. Epstein's victims. You were also allegedly close to Miss Ghislaine Maxwell, an Epstein co-conspirator, and attended an intimate dinner with her in 2014. 3 years after public reports about her involvement in Mr. Epstein's abuse of minors." But then the letter to Hillary also noting the apparent close relationship that the Clintons had with Epstein and added, "Ms. Maxwell's nephew worked for your 2008 presidential campaign and was hired by the State Department shortly after you became Secretary of State." You then had the letters addressed to the several attorneys general, mostly focusing on what role the DOJ played in the Epstein-related investigations at the time that they were the head of the department. And in the letter to Bill Barr, who was AG both under George H.W. Bush and during the latter half of Trump's first term, Comer said, "Your second tenure as U.S. Attorney General beginning in early 2019 coincided with the federal sex trafficking investigation of Jeffrey Epstein, as well as his eventual death while in federal detention. It also coincided with the federal indictment of Miss Ghislaine Maxwell, which stemmed from the Epstein investigation." Now, obviously, it's not clear yet how all of these people are going to respond to the subpoenas, but when it comes to the Clintons, you had people noting they've previously denied any wrongdoing when it comes to Epstein, with a spokesperson issuing a statement back in 2019 saying, "President Clinton knows nothing about the terrible crimes Jeffrey Epstein pleaded guilty to in Florida some years ago, or those with which he has been recently charged in New York." And then further claiming that he only traveled on Epstein's plane in connection with work for the Clinton Foundation, and he had not spoken to Epstein in over a decade. But all of that is, one, you had many people saying, "Hey, do you know who was president when Bill Barr was the AG and who had a long-term intimate relationship with Epstein and was also on his plane? The current president of the United States, why is he not included here?" But then two, it's going to be interesting to see where this Epstein news goes today, because it's not the only bit. Right in that, because 2 of Epstein's victims just sent scathing letters condemning the Trump administration's handling of the case to a judge in Manhattan, with both victims choosing to stay anonymous as they asked that any victim identifying information be redacted from any public release of Epstein-related documents. And one writing, "I come forward to you today in disdain, disgust, and fear of how the United States of America's DOJ has handled the promise to release the Epstein files. I use quotations because what are these files exactly anyway? Sad to say, for the victims, we never got our day in court. Apparently, Epstein killed himself under whose watch? Oh, was it Trump's DOJ? Interesting." And adding, "I am not some pawn in your political warfare. What you have done and continue to do is eating at me day after day as you help to perpetuate this story indefinitely. Why not be completely transparent? Show us all the files with only the necessary redaction. Be done with it and allow me/us to heal. You protect yourself and your powerful and wealthy friends, not enemies, over the victims. Why? The victims know the truth." But then the other letter echoing some of those concerns, questioning the circumstances of Epstein's death, and adding, "I am not sure the highest priority here is the victims, justice for the victims, or combating child exploitation." With that victim then also asking that a third party review the documents before a public release to ensure that no victims' names or likenesses are included, arguing that it is imperative with the scrutiny over this media frenzy that the victims are completely and entirely protected. As far as where Trump was at with this morning, he was on the roof. But hey, we'll continue to have eyes on this, and in the meantime, I'd really love to know your thoughts and reactions to what we're seeing here. And then next up in the news, Republicans, they were getting slaughtered in town halls earlier this year, and then they went away. And I will say, after what happened yesterday, I don't know if many are going to be coming back. And I say that because last night you had GOP Representative Mike Flood from Nebraska holding a town hall in his state where he answered questions from his constituents. The problem there, though, is that Nebraska's Democratic Party were like, "Hey, let's let our people know that this is happening." And they posted the details of the event online and added, "You know what to do." And so when Flood took that stage, the crowd that stared back at him was not a friendly one. And then as soon as he broached the first topic, the big, beautiful bill, he immediately got heckled.
There's been a lot of misinformation out there about the bill. Okay. Okay, let's start here. Please let me tell you why I voted the way I voted, and then we will take your questions, and you will have an opportunity to get answers.
Now, of course, with this, you know that this show is about trying to make all the news consumable. But with that, I gotta know that if I was to show you all of the heckling and the booing that he got, I'd have to just play the entire hour-and-a-half town hall for you, because it literally never stopped. Like, I think the bad dreams that he had about how this could have gone were probably smoother than how it actually played out. Right? And then when Flood actually tried to engage the audience in a dialogue, he didn't get the reactions that I guess he thought he might get.
If you choose not to work, you do not get free health care. You do not get free health care. Okay. So here's a question. Do you think that people who are 28 years old that can work and refuse to work should get free health care?
Flood then trying to appease them a little bit, but it just didn't work.
I truly believe this bill protects Medicaid for the future. I believe it.
Right, and then when Flood celebrated the BBB's tax cuts, they responded with a chant of their own.
Next slide, please. No taxes on overtime.
With it then getting to a point where the organizers started reading questions that were submitted from constituents, such as, why did you vote for a bill that increases the debt by $3 to $4 trillion?
When President Trump passed the 2017 tax cuts, we saw explosive growth in this country. We saw explosive growth.
And then the question, why did you cut SNAP, food stamps, and healthcare research?
We do not have unlimited money in the United States.
Right, and then they let the audience come up to the mic and ask their own questions directly, and that's where things really hit a different level.
With 450 million FEMA dollars being reallocated to open Alligator Alcatraz and 600 million taxpayer FEMA dollars being used to now open more concentration camps, and ICE burning through $8.4 million a day to illegally detain people, how much does it cost for fascism? How much do the taxpayers have to pay for a fascist country?
Americans went to the polls in November, and they had a choice between a Democratic candidate that had an open border, no enforcement, fentanyl, drugs, human trafficking. And they had a choice between that and a candidate that said, close the border.
He then also had another attendee making a point in a similar vein.
There's a saying that silence is complicity. Your silence tells us that you have no problem with the January 6th attack on the Capitol, the pardoning of all those involved, the big lie about the 2020 election with absolutely no evidence. These are all markers. These are markers of fascism. I have read a dozen or so books on authoritarianism and fascism. You said in Seward that you were not a fascist. Your complicity says otherwise. What is wrong with you? What is wrong with you?
Sir, I want to be very clear with you. Fascists don't hold town halls with open question and answer series. And what happened on January 6, 2021 was not right, and I'm on the record saying so.
But whether you think that he's a fascist or a fascist enabler or not, he was then also accused of being a capitalist shill.
Why does it seem like when you make your voting decisions, they're based on capital rather than the working class? Billionaires and corporations got their tax issues enshrined into law forever, but the working class gets a no tax on tips or overtime that only applies to some of us, and now we wind up in a situation where we are.
The Republican Party, now more than ever, represents the heart and soul of the working class.
He was then also asked about Israel and Gaza and the funding of Israel.
What happened on October 8th was an abomination. Well, October 7th, sorry. I support Israel. No American wants any child, no matter the place they live, to ever suffer. But you got to remember, we're dealing with Hamas.
Then, when he was asked about Trump firing the Bureau of Labor Statistics head for publishing jobs data that he didn't like, Flood just played dumb.
I don't know what the situation was with the Department of Labor person. Neither do you. I don't know. I will say this, though. If all that person did was get the data out there, if all that, and I don't know that's the case, but if that's all they did, I would not have fired her. I mean, to be honest, but I don't know because things are complicated.
Then finally, someone asked the question that really we all knew was coming.
Why are you covering up the Epstein files?
At the next pro forma session of the Congress, you'll find my name as a sponsor on a resolution from the House Rules Committee to release the Epstein files to protect the victims and not re-victimize them again. I support Jamie Comer, who is the House's Oversight Committee Chairman, subpoenaing Ms. Maxwell later this month to come testify in Washington. I am for the release of those records.
So there, I should correct him on a couple of things. First, Comer actually postponed the testimony by Ghislaine Maxwell back to October at the earliest. Right, and that supposedly so the Supreme Court can decide whether to review her case in late September. And second, the resolution he mentioned is non-binding, so it wouldn't actually force Trump to release the files. But then, after some more questions, Flood finally wrapped things up to a chance of vote him out.
Thank you very much, and have a safe drive home.
Now, obviously, with this, you have to note that the crowd of some 700 there, it didn't reflect all of Nebraska. As I noted before, the Democrats encouraged people to attend, and this was held in Lincoln, which is a relatively progressive city for the state. And all of that as Flood occupies a very safe seat, with him winning his district last year by more than 20 points. Right, and this is not the first time in a town hall where he has faced such a grilling. During another back in May, someone asked him about a line in the big, beautiful bill that stops scores from holding the White House in contempt if it ignores their injunctions, and Flood gave this answer.
I am not going to hide the truth. This provision was unknown to me when I voted for that bill.
And very notably, Republicans got similar treatment from their constituents as well. The likes of, for example, Senator Joni Ernst going viral for this response to someone yelling that people will die as a result of the Medicaid cuts.
Well, we all are going to die.
But, it's been a minute, and now this 6-week recess that Mike Johnson called early to avoid voting on releasing the Epstein files, it's ended up being the first time that they've had an extended break since the BBB passed. And so this reception that Flood received, it's what a lot of his colleagues were fearing would happen, which is actually why back in March, with the chairman of the House Republican campaign arm warning his colleagues against doing in-person town halls and suggesting, hey, do virtual events where questions and comments could be filtered. And now it appears that Flood himself agrees, with him telling reporters after yesterday's town hall, "This is my third and final one for the year. We're going to give you all a break," which very much sounds like me on a call that I wish ended 10 minutes ago going, let me give you back your day. Sorry for holding you up. Right, but also, notably with this, you had the New York Times adding here that the 35 House Republicans whose seats are being targeted by Democrats next year, only one of them, Brian Steele, has actually done an in-person town hall, and it did not go well either.
But what I view is the moral hazard created by the Biden administration by allowing the U.S.-Mexico border to remain insecure. And so...
And you have many arguing that reflects a growing popular frustration with the ruling party, especially on particular issues. I mean, for instance, polling shows that Americans oppose the BBB, seeing it as a handout to the rich that hurts poor people and balloons the debt. And in a recent survey, 70% of people said that Trump is not handling the Epstein case well, with only 18% saying that he is. And of course, the impact of his trade policy, wherever it lands, it's been chaotic, it's going to be felt by a lot of people very directly. So, Democrats, they're wanting to fight that, though really at this point they have no power. And so they're hoping to capitalize on all those weak points going into next year's midterms. Historically, they have a reason to be optimistic there. The first midterm typically punishes the incumbent president's party, and Republicans already have a very slim majority. Democrats only having to net 3 seats in the House to flip it. But for the Senate, which is very different, they would have to flip 4. The one, as we've been talking about, the gerrymandering in Texas and other states, it could give Republicans the seats that they need to hold on to the House. And then as far as the Senate, most of the GOP Senate seats that are up for re-election next year, they're in red states. So it would be a very big uphill battle for the Democrats there. But also, and I always try to stress this whenever we talk about it, as much as people are not liking what Donald Trump is doing and the negative feelings we're seeing against Republicans, that doesn't mean they like Democrats. In fact, voters in one poll this month, they gave the party a 19% approval rating with 72% disapproving. So Democrats, I think they really need to start adding an "and" to where they've been ending their sentences. Or just saying what Trump and Republicans are doing is horrible, it doesn't make a difference if at the end of that sentence you don't go, and this is what I'm gonna do about it, or this is what I can offer. Being against something is only part of a personality. What are you for? And speak like normal ass people. Please do not do such a horrible job one day I have to leave my cushy gig and fucking throw my hat in the ring. I would hate it. And then I've got more news for you in just a minute, but first, summer, it's officially upon us and you need to get out more, right? And with that, we've been giving out $500 every week for over a year thanks to our sponsor over at SeatGeek, and somehow some of y'all still haven't entered for free, which is crazy because right now the lineup is stacked. Lady Gaga, The Weeknd, Morgan Wallen, Lorde, Tate McRae, the Lumineers. It is a wild time for live events. And it's been really awesome seeing so many of you beautiful bastards winning the $500 SeatGeek weekly giveaway and using it to hit up concerts, games, Broadway shows, everything. Just living your best lives. And if you haven't entered yet, it takes like 2 seconds, and next week's $500 winner, it could be you. Right, and for the uninitiated, SeatGeek is the #1 rated ticketing app with over 28 million downloads and tickets to over 70,000 events, sports, music, comedy, theater, you name it. First timers, you download the app, you scan the QR code, or you hit that link in the description, and you use code PHIL for $20 off your first ticket purchase. And then, and this is key, you add code PDS to your SeatGeek account as well. That gets you $10 off any ticket, and it enters you for your chance to win the $500 weekly giveaway, no purchase required. And for SeatGeek vets, you've used SeatGeek before, that applies to you as well. Just add code PDS to your account and you're entered. So hey, scan the QR code or click the link below and use code PHIL and PDS and go make some memories. And then next up, we've got to talk about how Texas Governor Greg Abbott, just a few years ago, he was complaining that it was wrong to use the justice system to target political opponents. And then shortly after the show went out yesterday, he did just that. Because to give you a quick recap, Texas Republicans want to hold a session to vote on a variety of things, including redistricting the state at Trump's command. A move that many have described as Trump trying to steal the election. And state Democrats, they definitely don't have the votes to stop this blatant attempt to gerrymander. So instead, they, I believe the technical term is skedaddled out of the state. So the state legislature, they couldn't hold a quorum. And Abbott was not a fan, and he threatened to arrest them if they didn't return by the afternoon, which they did not. So Abbott, he followed through and said in a statement, Texas House Democrats abandoned their duty and are holding flood relief and property tax cuts hostage. They ordered Texas DPS to arrest and return every derelict House Democrat to the Texas Capitol. This order will remain in effect until all missing Democrats are accounted for. That then followed by this announcement saying, I directed the Texas Rangers to investigate fleeing House Democrats for potential violations of Texas law. Any Democrat who solicited or accepted funds to break quorum may have violated bribery laws. Texas Rangers must quickly send any findings to the appropriate prosecutors. With then the Texas House Speaker signing civil arrest warrants for the absent Democrats. Right, and with all that, you'll notice that there's some PR work going on in those statements. Right, Abbott, he never mentions that the Democrats left to protest and stopped redistricting efforts that would egregiously gerrymander the state, instead claiming that they're holding flood relief and property tax cuts hostage. And, like any good political spin, there is a grain of truth to that, because the entire reason the Texas lawmakers were even supposed to be meeting for this special session was due to the floods that killed over 100 people. But then it could easily be argued that it's actually Abbott and Republicans that are holding all that hostage because they decided, hey, we're also going to gerrymander the district in the middle of a cycle. This is the thing you do every 10 years. It happened 4 years ago, and you're doing it because Trump said, get me 5 seats. And so with all that, you have Democratic lawmakers pushing back at the idea that those were seriously the focus of the sessions. With, for example, State Representative John Boosie III saying, when the governor wants to actually have a special session focused on flood relief, I'll be at my desk. With him then going on to add,
I didn't run for office to walk out of the Capitol, but I also didn't run for office to stand by while democracy is stolen in broad daylight. Texas Democrats broke quorum because sometimes the only way to uphold your oath is to refuse to play along with the rigged game.
Right, and then he went on to criticize that the special session was supposed to be about saving lives before getting hijacked by the redistricting bill.
But instead of holding hearings on flood prevention, Greg Abbott and Donald Trump held 8 hearings on redistricting, not for fairness, not for representation, but to manufacture 5 more Republican seats in Congress to enable Trump to cling on to power.
But notably, with that, you had Abbott putting spin on that as well in a post this morning and claiming Texas Democrats abandoned their duties and fled to blue states with gross gerrymandering that has distorted our country's politics. That must change. In Texas, we'll make sure voters can elect the candidate of their choice. Then Trump making similar claims this morning, saying,
we have an opportunity in Texas to pick up 5 seats. We have a really good governor, and we have good people in Texas. And I won Texas.
With then Trump making claims about and criticizing blue states.
That's all gerrymandered. California's gerrymandered. We should have many more seats in Congress in California. It's all gerrymandered.
Right, and so in general, they're claiming that by gerrymandering Texas, they're actually making the state more representative of how the people actually vote. Now, with that on an even playing field, I'm not going to defend gerrymandering in blue states, especially Illinois. They're not innocent. But to claim that redrawing Texas's districts will better represent voters, it's patently false. Currently, they have 25 Republican representatives and 12 Democrats, so 65% of the representatives are Republican. And then if they shift 5 seats to Republicans, that would mean that almost 79% of the seats are Republican. So then you get to the question of, okay, does that reflect how Texas voted in 2024? And the answer is absolutely not. Just a little over 56% of Texans there voted for Trump. And if anything, 5 seats would need to be given to the Democrats to make the number actually closer to how people voted. But with all that said, getting back to the notion of political theater, for the time being, those arrest warrants, they're largely toothless. Or with legal experts saying that non-criminal warrants like this, they aren't really enforceable outside of state lines. Though for some of the Democratic lawmakers, it doesn't appear like it would even matter. Or you had figures like State Representative Ramon Romero saying things like,
I'll pay that price for America. That would be a very small price to pay for what we would save for these Americans that have fought so hard and against the maps that aim directly at black and brown voices.
But then with that, let's say they never go back. They keep things at a standstill. What then? Well, with that, you have Abbott threatening to remove them from office in what will undoubtedly be a long and messy legal process. Because technically, there are laws on Texas's books that allow lawmakers to be arrested if they don't show up without an excuse. But at the same time, the all-Republican Texas Supreme Court ruled back in 2021 that participating in a quorum break was explicitly allowed. And then, this idea that Abbott might still seriously try to remove the lawmakers from office, it's gotten him a lot of criticism, including from people like California Governor Gavin Newsom, who wrote, "The governor of Texas is threatening to remove democratically elected officials from office because they have refused to rig an election for Donald Trump. United States of America, 2025. And then, of course, because we're talking about Newsom, I then also have to mention that he threatened again to gerrymander the fuck out of California if Texas does this. And while obviously gerrymandering is bad and lame, Newsom's threat, it highlights why Texas's moves here are so dangerous. Normally, this is a fight that happens once every 10 years and then it's put on ice. But if states start to decide, they can just draw new maps whenever in order to consistently affect elections, then it's going to be complete chaos. The second one state abandons even pretending to represent voters, every other state feels like they're going to have to do the same or just get walked over, which is why we're seeing states like Illinois getting asked if they're going to try to redraw their maps. And there you're seeing things like Governor J.B. Pritzker saying it was possible and that lawmakers had to put everything on the table. And then in New York, you have lawmakers introducing an amendment to the state's constitution that would allow them to redraw district maps before a census. I mean, it's such a ridiculous situation that we're even seeing some Republican lawmakers trying to put a stop to it despite Trump wanting to find more Republican seats. I mean, you've got people like Representative Kevin Kiley, a California Republican, who wants to introduce a bill today that would pause any redistricting effort nationwide and nullify new maps made before the 2030 census. Well, also, before you give him too much credit, his seat is probably one of the ones that are going to get gutted. But, with all that said, it does look like this is a situation that is going to continue and simmer, especially as Texas Democrats are still refusing to come back to Texas. And as I was finishing recording, the state legislature once again had to end its session after failing to reach a quorum. But, in the meantime, one, I'd really love to know your thoughts here. And two, actually go more into detail on this and my thoughts and how I think this is going to play out on today's episode of In Good Faith with Philip DeFranco. So definitely check out that top link after today's show. There's a lot to chew on here. And then I've got more news for you in a second. But first, what's wild? Your privacy is worth less than a gas station coffee because it's already been sold 5 times over. And an unfortunate true story, cops in some states, they're not even bothering with warrants anymore. They're just buying your data from shady brokers. And that's one of the reasons I use today's sponsor, Incogni. They actually fight back. Incogni scrubs your personal information, name, email, phone number, shopping history, even your family ties from the dark corners of the internet. Right? All those creepy people finder sites, gone. And trying to do this manually, it's a full-time job, but Incogni automates the process so you don't have to drown in opt-out forms. You get a dashboard, ongoing removals, and now with the unlimited and family unlimited plans, you can flag even more sites for takedown. I mean, seriously, Google yourself. It feels like you've been digitally doxxed. And with custom removals, you just say, no thanks to specific sites, and Incogni handles the war. And the results are real. I've seen my info vanish from dozens of sites in weeks. And in a world where privacy laws lag, Incogni is taking the lead and letting you opt out of being a product. So just scan that QR code or head to incogni.com/DeFranco and use code DeFranco to get 60% off. It's incogni.com/DeFranco, code DeFranco to take your personal data off the market. And then next up today, we've got to talk about how Donald Trump's efforts to help Jair Bolsonaro, they've backfired. Because Brazil's ex-president is now under house arrest for violating a court order that was actually put into place for seeking out Trump's help in the first place. And that is, he's already awaiting trial for allegedly plotting to take over the country after he lost the election, which I will say that's actually a good place to start. Because Trump, he seems to see something of himself in Bolsonaro, which when you look at it, it makes sense for a number of reasons, including Bolsonaro, he refused to concede defeat and basically claimed that the only way that he could have actually lost the election was election fraud. And then just a few months later, on January 8th, thousands of his supporters ransacked the country's presidential palace, the Supreme Court building, and a House of Congress. But that is where the similarities end. Because later that year, Brazil's top electoral court ruled that Bolsonaro abused his power and cast unfounded doubts on the country's electronic voting system. system. They banned him from running for office until 2030. And last year, the country's federal police formally accused Bolsonaro of attempting a coup, with the country's top prosecutor later revealing additional allegations that Bolsonaro actually plotted to poison his successor and shoot dead the Supreme Court justice that was investigating it. And that's the same justice who ordered his house arrest this week, the same one that publicly clashed with Elon Musk over his refusal to block certain accounts on X, and the same one that Trump Media and Technology Group, which is majority owned by Trump and runs his Truth Social site, sued earlier this year. Also, as far as other connections, one of Bolsonaro's sons who served as a congressman in Brazil moved to the United States, and since March, he's reportedly been roaming the halls of the White House trying to convince people in the administration to help his father. And while very likely it wouldn't have required much prodding, if there was prodding, it clearly worked. Right, last month, you had Trump threatening that tariffs on Brazilian imports would go up to 50%, with him calling the case against Bolsonaro a witch hunt and also citing a non-existent trade deficit. And last week, you had him making good on that threat, which actually makes the tariffs against Brazil the highest of any that Trump has actually gone through with, and arguably with even less economic justification. And that's not even all of it there. You had the White House hitting that Supreme Court justice with sanctions and accusing him of authorizing arbitrary pretrial detentions and suppressing freedom of expression. But then, in turn, the judge labeling Trump's actions as part of an illegal and immoral effort to obstruct justice. An effort the judge said was being engineered by a group of Brazilian traders who had lobbied foreign authorities to carry out hostile acts against the country's economy. And there, of course, he's referring to Bolsonaro and his allies, including his son, who, wouldn't you know it, is now reportedly seeking U.S. citizenship to avoid going back to Brazil. And actually, with that, the judge specifically cited the younger Bolsonaro's lobbying as a justification for an order last month that banned his daddy from going on social media and making him wear a tracker bracelet on his ankle. With that, then bringing us full circle, because that's the order that the judge says that Bolsonaro has now violated. Or with him pointing to the fact that Bolsonaro recently appeared virtually at a protest via phone call with his other son, with that one being a senator in Brazil, and you had the judge writing in his decision that the former president had used the social media accounts of allies to share messages containing, quote, clear encouragement and incitement to attack the Supreme Federal Court and overt support for foreign intervention in Brazil's judiciary. And then adding that Bolsonaro had repeated his unlawful conduct in an even more severe and defiant manner, and saying that he continued to urge and incite a foreign head of state to take measures aimed at unlawfully interfering with the normal course of judicial proceedings. Now there you had Bolsonaro's lawyers denying that he violated any order, saying that they would appeal the decision. But then also, notably, the U.S. State Department came out with a statement condemning the order very, very fast, accusing the judge of using Brazil's institutions to silence opposition and threaten democracy, and adding, the United States will hold accountable all those aiding and abetting sanctioned conduct. And while it's not clear yet exactly what that would look like, what the further efforts to hold accountable would look like, as far as the things that the United States has tried so far, you have many saying that it's backfired. I mean, you've seen a lot of anger getting directed at the Bolsonaros for bringing Trump down on the country, all while the country's current president seemingly getting a bump in the polls because he's being defiant of Trump. But this is far from over. We're gonna have to see where things continue to trend, and also if and how the U.S. gets involved even more. And then, next up today, let's talk about Attorney General Pam Bondi now ordering an investigation into whether or not Obama officials manipulated intelligence while assessing Russian interference in the 2016 election. In this, it comes as members of the Trump administration have been trying to focus on 2016 a lot lately, with many describing this as yet another Trump distraction from the just numerous numbers of scandals, including the Trump Epstein scandal. But with that, you've had Tulsi Gabbard releasing documents that she controversially claimed proved wrongdoing in the Obama administration, and the DOJ then opening a task force to look at those claims. Trump himself even accusing Obama of treason. Now you've got Bondi launching a probe, with a source even telling the AP that she directed a prosecutor to present evidence to a grand jury. Though I will say, right now, it's not clear which officials will be targeted or which prosecutors will be involved in the investigation. But still, I mean, we could see big consequences. I mean, this could make way for an indictment against whichever officials are investigated. So it's no surprise that you had the AP explaining that, quote, the development is likely to heighten concerns that the Justice Department is being used to achieve political ends. Right? Because multiple intelligence reports have already found that, yes, Russia did indeed seek to sway the 2016 election in Trump's favor. The Mueller report even landed convictions for Trump allies, though it didn't prove any collusion between Russia and members of the Trump campaign. And then in 2020, a bipartisan review from the Senate Intelligence Committee likewise found interference and concluded that Obama officials acted without political bias while assessing that interference. And a very key thing is that current Secretary of State and then Senator Marco Rubio even signed off on the investigation and said that while the Trump campaign did not collude with Russia here, there was still irrefutable evidence of Russian meddling. And so seemingly because of that and numerous other reasons, you had a former unnamed DOJ official slamming Bondi's move to NBC News and calling it a political stunt and arguing that there is no logical, rational basis for this. So obviously, none of those arguments have stopped Trump and his camp from repeatedly claiming that officials were seeking to undermine his first term by focusing on Russian interference. And so you had Trump applauding the news on Truth Social, writing the truth always wins out, this is great news. And then, while on CNBC, he claimed that he was not part of this decision, though he did continue to cheer it on.
Pam is doing a great job. I have nothing to do with it. I will tell you this. They deserve it. I was happy to hear it. I actually read it just like you did. I have nothing to do with it.
You had Trump then going on to again claim that the 2020 election was rigged as well. So, he's kind of playing the hits. But then a White House spokesperson releasing a statement saying this effort aims to provide the American people with the truth about the extent to which former government officials worked to sabotage the Trump administration and undermine the will of the American people in a clear attempt to subvert our constitutional republic. This is a spokesperson for Obama already slammed the claims as bizarre and a distraction. But still, distraction or not, this does appear to be moving forward and it could affect a lot of people. And that, my friend, you beautiful bastard, is where today's show is gonna end. But one, remember there's even more we gotta talk about today. I got a brand new episode of the In Good Faith podcast. You should definitely check it out. Top link in the description. I had Dan Pfeiffer on, who I think woke up this morning wanting to fight. And two, no matter what you do, I'll see you right back here tomorrow because, of course, I'll have a brand new show for you. So thank you for watching. Stay safe out there. Stay sane out there, and I'll see you then.